Deconstructing DJG. I am DJG, and this week we had a reversal of last week. TK is busy, and so it is just me and Rick tonight.
Hello.
And today we are going to talk shiny, happy people, but we are going to talk about it from a theological perspective. Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar highly recommended that people take the Institute in Basic Life Principles Basic Seminar in order to ensure a happy godly family unit. They thought that it really was the cornerstone of ensuring that you had a godly, peaceful family at home. So, we're going to look at exactly what the Basic Seminar talks about. Thank you to my wonderful followers who sent me Institute in Basic Life Principles textbooks. I have gone through the Basic Seminar textbook, which actually, it happens to be one of the original printings of it, because I think it's like the second edition, but it's from 1977. So it's early IBLP. This is basically the IBLP that Jim Bob and Michelle would have been influenced by more directly than what the IBLP has put out on their website more recently.
Oh, I can't wait.
Buckle up. This is an interesting journey. So the main theme of this basic seminar is conflict and conflict resolution. Sounds great,
Oh,
right? But as we all know from watching Shiny Happy People, probably not so much. They talk about there being 6 basic areas of conflict. The first two, the two that are most key, are your assurance of salvation and your self-image. That is conforming to the assigned gender at birth.
seems legit. I
They talk about people being self-conscious about physical deficiencies. And while I know they mean it to be a body positive, you should love the body that God gave you, in other materials put out by the IBLP, it is also fat shaming. Not all bodies are okay. They talk about these inborn features that you have. And I'm thinking they know that there's all kinds of parts of our body that change after we're born. We might be commonly proceeding in one particular way or another, but that doesn't mean that's how it is for everybody, and there is no understanding of the differences between these physical deficiencies that we're supposed to be okay with and not quote unquote extremely self-conscious about. And there's this weird fuzzy line of what is something you're supposed to give to God and what is something you're supposed to actually get assistance for.
That's what's wild to me too. Is I don't know if this is a thing that's acceptable with IBLP because I wasn't raised in it. But it's so bizarre to me how many Christians will have this mindset and especially really be like apply this to trans people. But like the minute like a cis woman will want to get like a boob job, fine.
Or I would say in my evangelical circles, a boob job definitely wasn't okay, unless it was a reconstructive surgery after a mastectomy due to cancer. There were lots of fertility treatment, hysterectomies, vasectomies, some things you're allowed to change. And what's lovely is a hysterectomy for a cis woman is a necessary thing in many situations. And so these women weigh out the symptoms that they are experiencing and the risks that they carry due to keeping their uterus. And then you have trans people who also look at the symptoms that they are experiencing because they have a uterus. And both of these sets of people may come to the decision that they need a hysterectomy. However, only one of those sets of people are actually able to get them in 75% of the country.
Oh, absolutely. How these people feel about fertility treatments. That's a bit because I know the quiverful thing is really big with them and anti-birth control, but how do they feel about fertility treatments? Because
So,
wouldn't that be interfering with God's plan or whatever the fuck?
no, God's plan is only that you have as many kids as possible. His plan never includes choosing not to have children or whatever. If you're not able to physically conceive, you're supposed to adopt or foster or something. But it is the height of selfishness to live your life as an adult without caring for children. Now, that's on a spectrum. I had churches that were they were like, it's not a sin to not have kids, but what's wrong with you? And then there were other places that were like, oh no, you're married, you're not having children yet, you need to get on that. I have had so many completely inappropriate conversations with fellow worshipers or aunts in my life who made all sorts of assumptions about what I should be doing with my uterus. And I did not ask for any of this input. I thank you to not go there again with me. But if you need help getting pregnant, most of the time they're pretty pro like hormone injections or the crunchy stuff like seed cycling or really careful like observation of your cervical mucus, and it's a whole thing. But like there is a huge push to get pregnant by any means necessary, and the only thing that they really have a major problem with is in vitro. And the only reason why they have a problem with in vitro is because of the egg disposal.
I guess that makes sense, but it's just still kind of odd.
Oh, I didn't say it had to make sense, but as soon as a gay couple wants to avail themselves of things like surrogacy or sperm donors and stuff like that, then it's suddenly a major, major problem. It is the downfall of society, and we're all going to hell. In the sphere around the Duggars and IBLP, and let's not forget the Bates in this, because as
Yeah.
much as Shiny Happy People talked about the Duggars kind of taking the helm of IBLP, Gil Bates is above them in IBLP. He is
Yeah.
the man in IBLP right now. We can't forget these other families. The Duggars just happen to be the most widely known. But anyways, the sphere that they are in is very focused on outpopulating anyone who believes differently than they do. And so there are many moral and ethical gray areas that you're allowed to get into in order to achieve that goal.
Fucking wild to me. I have. This is probably the only intelligent thing I'm gonna say like throughout this video. One thing I was surprised I didn't see talked about in that documentary is that there was almost like a weird pipeline that kind of happened when it came to reality shows involving not just like IBLP but like, religious crap in general on like these pretty
Mhm.
typical secular networks like John and Kate plus 8, for example, they were Christian
Yes.
and it was discussed in the show at multiple points. And it almost was kind of slowly introducing the audience more and more to like this type of insanity.
Absolutely. I want to say it's episode 4. I was over that a little bit, just real briefly to see that it wasn't just the Duggars and the Bates and the Plaths. There was John and Kate. There was Octomom. There was Wife Swap and
I know what
Trading
you're talking.
Spouses, maybe. Anyways, they came up with, ooh, this is a juicy topic that people want to watch. And so they came out with much more and more like shock value stuff, where the Duggars were shock value stuff, but packaged in this very wholesome little set of content because the kids all wore matching outfits and they all played violins and they just were just so sweet and wholesome. And so they put that face on it, and then other networks were like, oh well, this needs to be more salacious, and so they would mix the what's that lady from Wife Swap that goes on
Not of God. It's not Christians. Did you not ask if she believed in God? She's not a Christian.
She could be a Jew and believe in God.
It doesn't matter. She's tampering in dark-sided stuff. Yes, she did. The entire house is dark-sided.
She said her...
I want nothing. I want my God and I want my family. This is tainted. I don't want it. Whatever it is, it's tainted. Whatever it is you give it me, I give it up to God. I'm a God warrior, and I don't want someone with tainted anything in beliefs doing anything with my family.
They get people like her, and so people look at her and they're like, oh yeah, we could obviously laugh at that, because I don't want to make insane a pejorative, because as a person with mental health I should be more considerate of that, but just so nonsensical, and it, wow, you can easily dismiss her because she is so wild and flagrant. But then you have the Duggars, which are this nice, happy little family with Michelle, who just talks so sweetly, and I might have to beat the baby, but look at him, he's so cute.
Exactly. And I don't know if it was intentional by the networks or not. And the main reason I keep comparing the two is because when I was a kid, the two I remember being on TV was like the Duggars and then John and Kate plus 8. But you had Kate literally abusing her husband on camera,
Right?
like constantly. And they were Christian and it was kind of mentioned, but they weren't practicing enough.
Yeah.
And then in comparison, we have the Duggars who are really into their faith, and it's, oh, look at how happy and wholesome their family is. So just side note, everybody owes John Gosling a massive apology, and I will die on that hill. It's just something I noticed, is how that those networks almost really did push for this crap. And I really don't know to what extent it was intentional from anyone on that team being involved in IBLP or anything like that. I didn't finish the documentary, by the way, just full disclaimer anyway. It's just something I kind of noticed while watching it, and I was like, wait, it's a little weird how the more religious these people are, the more wholesome they're portrayed.
There's a certain amount of truth to that, because you're much less likely to see some emo kid with blacked out eyes and spikes on his wrist in the Duggars than you are on Wife Swap.
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount of conformity to modest, wholesome, traditional standards. But what sucks about that is it just makes the abuse that much more insidious, because it's like the abuser that makes sure to only hit you in places where no one else can see.
Exactly.
None of it is good. But there was certainly a concerted effort to put families like the Duggars on TV, because it was part of an actual orchestrated plan. There was actually a cabal behind this. Unlike Pizzagate, there actually was a cabal here involved. You had the moral majority that had been roaring since the 70s and really took off with the pro-life twist that evangelicals took, and Bill Gothard was right there at that exact same time coming up with his rules for how to structure and manage your family. And all of that was built on the core principles of the moral majority. So it's all this incestuous commingling of both political and theological goals of multiple religious groups. I do want to highlight then that number one, the very first highest area of conflict is assurance of salvation. And I love that they're making this the core, because if you ask any evangelical person what their greatest anxiety was growing up, it was, am I saved?
Absolutely.
And so this book, from the very beginning, at the very first part of the basic seminar, is to hound you that yes, that needs to be your core focus. And I'm sorry, but that leads to things like religious OCD, also known as scrupulosity.
I didn't know that was the term for it. I actually really needed to know that.
I'm the old auntie. I know everything. Haha, just kidding. The next two conflicts are your purpose in life. Someone has well said that if we do not have something worth dying for, we do not have something worth living for either.
This was something that was drilled into my head pretty young too.
100%.
And it has caused me so much dysfunction. I can't just sit down and not feel like I need to do something constantly. And it really sucks. For me, it's like to the extreme because I have OCD, also a shitload of trauma. But I can't take a day and just not do anything because of like how this was like a thing. I always have to have a goal that I need to get to. And then if I don't have one that I'm constantly working toward, I feel horrible about myself.
Exactly. What are you doing on this planet if you're not working on a project every single day, and preferably all day, every single day, no days off?
Never a day off.
And then, of course, number 4 is harmony at home. That there is a significant benefit and reward to the one who submits to authority and direction of his parents. Sir, this is like the core of your problem, as beautifully explained by Shiny Happy People. It is this blind, dogged persistence at a specific, universal authority structure that does not allow for questioning or reporting abuse.
It's almost like pretending problems just don't exist and like constantly just listening to your assigned authority figure. That might not be the way to deal with conflict and issues. It's almost like communication might be a good thing.
They're talking about how the father has not assumed his role of spiritual leadership in modern day society. And the women, mothers, gasp, are trying to quote unquote fill the gap. And you do realize that mothers are fully parents too.
That's what's wild to me about it's not possible to a family function without the father doing somewhat of the parenting and the mother doing somewhat of other things. Like, it just doesn't work that way. No matter how hard these people try to push dad, breadwinner, authority, mom, change diaper, like you can't have a functioning household like that. The dad is going to have to change a diaper at some point.
Although, Jim Bob, it has been fabled that he did not change more than 2 or 3 diapers. Actually, I'm not even sure if he changed any diapers, despite having 19 freaking children.
Well, yeah, that makes sense, to be fair, because
because the kids
do it.
She wasn't really a mom either. She just played with them when they were an infant, and then once they were no longer fun and a dopamine source, she passed them off to somebody else, and they were no longer her problem, outside of doing fun things like demanding blanket training and, oh, get that glue stick out, just smack them. It's fine.
And then once they're too old for that, just take them out in like Amish clothing occasionally to show them off. Go back home.
All right, number 5, moral purity. Now, I love that they and this was very common in the churches that I was in. Now, I wasn't strictly IBLP. I did have friends and family that were involved with IBLP, but my immediate family did not go to the seminars or anything. However, an enormous number of these beliefs that we're about to go over were present in my experience. So it is very pervasive. It is not just Bill Gothard. Yes, he created an immense power structure that did humongous damage to thousands of people, but it wasn't just him. He certainly, I want to say he perfected the thing, but I don't know. James Dobson gives him a good run for his money.
For sure.
Because James Dobson is just a prettier package on the exact same beliefs, because James Dobson was trained, fun thing, by a Yahtzee to do marriage and family therapy. So you can see where he gets his ideas from. Anyway, you've got to have youthful lusts. Because, of course, if you feel any sort of attraction towards another person or have any sort of romantic or sexual thought, clearly that is youthful, that is immature, etc. Unless it's between two married people, and then it's fine. And really, you're supposed to be into them and everything, but only them, and do not admit to anybody that you actually have any of these feelings or thoughts that are not directly stimulated by the presence of your spouse.
Oh, it's just so wild to me how these people genuinely believe the human body and brain works. I know they're saying it's immature, but even adults will just get boners for no reason.
Morning wood is a thing. We know you all do this, and that's why you all suck. And then number 6. Oh, this one is like an irony sandwich. Genuine friendships. One of the most basic human needs is intimate fellowship with others. When we try to fulfill this need without knowing or following the freedoms and responsibilities on each level of friendship, a host of lifelong conflicts results, and we miss the necessary experience of developing genuine friendships.
I know that to some extent there are some social responsibilities to keeping and maintaining friendships, but when there are actual responsibilities to keep someone as a friend, typically those aren't ones that you would want to keep around. Those are usually the ones that cause more problems.
Exactly. So it's one thing to want to have common interests or goals with your friends, but as we'll see as they detail out here in a bit, you're literally supposed to have projects for everyone at all times. And it's like, yo, what were we just saying about how I can't take a goddamn day off? I can't even relax with my friends without needing to have a project involved.
No, exactly. And I'm kind of waiting for them too to get to the unequally yoked shit.
All right, so they talk about how to appropriately read and apply scripture. Again, in the King of All Ironies, they say you should look at why it was written, to whom it was written, what were the conditions at the time, what is the precise meaning in the original language, and what related scriptures explain it further. Now, those are excellent steps to determining interpretation of really anything. It could be Shakespeare or the Bible, but those are solid study skills. Here's the thing, though. You're not allowed to do any of this stuff unless you are a father or Bill Gothard himself, and even the fathers are a little discouraged from doing that. You're just supposed to take Bill Gothard as the God's honest truth, or James Dobson as the God's honest truth, Ken Ham as the God's honest truth. They don't actually let you do this.
It's so manipulative because they'll present this, but then it's like, well, also, this is what we're telling you it means, but we want you to think that this is what you're figuring out for yourself.
They expect your confirmation bias to override everything else.
Exactly.
Oh, they had a whole bunch of examples of this. I just grabbed a couple because we're not reading the whole 157-page book like I had to last week. So we have surface problems and surface causes, and then it will get into the root problems and the root causes. So, surface problem, resulting illnesses, wrong priorities, financial problems, lying, stealing, cheating, arguing. One of these things is not like the other.
Exactly. What?
Illnesses typically are not the result of inward conflicts. Now, I'm going to give you a phrase that I heard a lot about this. It was dis-ease causes disease.
I'm sorry, it's Jesus.
And so then surface causes are insecurity, worry, anger, envy, jealousy, tension. Now, I will say that if you hold a lot of tension for a very long time, you're probably going to have musculoskeletal issues, but that's the only way I can see any of these resulting in illness.
I guess anxiety, when they say worry, you can get stomach ulcers
True.
from that, at least, but that's about really it.
And I really wouldn't put worry on the same level as chronic anxiety that causes gastrointestinal issues. Like, that's just a whole other level. Now, the root problem is greed for money and possessions. So you got the flu because you're greedy.
If this was directly under...
It was directly under.
Every single illness ever has been wanted because somebody just wanted to go buy a Squishmallow. Got it. Thanks, Bill Gothard.
So every time someone gets admitted to the hospital, is that when a Squishmallow gets its wings? The root cause of that greed is refusing to dedicate personal rights and possessions to God. This is where it gets incredibly harmful. Because they talk at length at this, we'll get to this in a little bit, about personal rights and how you basically don't have any. And any anger that you feel in your life is because you are not appropriately giving away control of those rights.
And not to God, to Bill Gothard.
Ultimately to God, but to the upper levels of your umbrella of authority. And to others in certain situations, but like I said, we'll get there. There is a dialectic within evangelicalism in regards to grace, because on the one hand, God's grace covers all, and so by his grace, all of our sins are paid for. But there is a verse, and I'm like 99% sure it's from a Pauline epistle. So you know my feelings on that. But there's a verse that says you do not want to take advantage of the grace of God and use it as an excuse to sin. Because, well, God's going to forgive me anyways.
Yeah. I wish I remembered it too, because that was one I heard growing up.
I will end up looking it up when I'm editing and I'll paste it in. That's the beauty of not doing this live like Paul and Morgan.
Oh God, I could not do that.
No, I have way too much anxiety for that. So, the benefit of self-examination. Again, the irony is heavy here. We're supposed to maintain a periodic program of self-examination. When things are going well for us and we are not easily motivated to this activity, but when a major conflict arises and our spirit is grieved, we have the most effective motivation to search out the inner motives, actions, words, and attitudes of our heart. Man, if shit goes down, that's when it's time to really get hardcore OCD about reviewing every single action that could have possibly led to the situation you're in.
God damn.
And of course, if you don't like being told that, whoso loveth instruction loveth knowledge, but he that hateth reproof is brutish. Thank you, King James. He does say we're not easily motivated to this activity when things are going well, but let's be honest. I really do not see either Bill Gothard or Jim Bob Duggar or Josh Duggar doing any sort of self-examination outside of a PR perspective. How do I spin this? How do I hide this? How do I make myself look good in this?
Exactly.
You're supposed to self-examine. You're supposed to study the Bible properly. All of that looks great and dandy because we're on, what, page 3, page 4? These are some of the most convoluted diagrams I have ever seen in my goddamn life.
Yeah, I'm so confused looking at this.
And none of it makes any fucking sense. We
Why
have discern attitudes, clarify basic problems, and identify necessary decisions, and then giving directions to youth. And then on the right-hand side, we have illustrate basic ideas from scripture, personal, and other. And I'm like, so where do you put the illustrations in? Shouldn't that be in between identifying the necessary decisions and giving the direction to youth?
Yeah.
None of this makes sense. And then, of course, he's got his 6 areas here that he's going to harp on. It makes no goddamn sense. And as a graphic designer, like, I am personally offended by things like this.
I was gonna say, this just boosted my confidence because I've been really, really self-conscious because I'm not one of those people that uses the grids. And I have something I'm working on right now that I'm getting paid for. I'm really embarrassed about the work I've been doing on it. It's gonna get done tonight now.
Oh, this isn't even the weirdest one either. This is one of the more easily understandable ones. Just wait until we get into the interactions between friends and family members. Wow. Oh, if you need further assistance with doing conflict resolution with your teenagers, the first thing to tell you to do is attend a full seminar, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's what this is.
I would think so. This is basically a seminar in like a written format.
So the seminars have textbooks, and so the textbook that I read, that I got all of these screenshots from, is the actual textbook that you would have used in one of the full seminars. It even has notes penciled in a couple of areas. I was very excited to see that. None of them are helpful, but there's stuff written in it. I guess it was useful to the person who took the seminar. But 1 is attend the full seminar. 2 is ask God for wisdom. Isn't asking God for wisdom supposed to be the first thing that you do in literally any and all circumstances?
You would think that in a Christian anything that isn't the first thing that's listed.
Correct. And of course, the reason why is because you can't possibly know God if you aren't knowing God in the Bill Gothard way, which is the infighting that we see from every single denomination and church and family. I remember on the mission field, we were at so many different churches, and that was whether we were asking for money, whether we were ministering, whether they were our home church. But we would be driving home from services almost every single week. And my parents, mostly my dad, would be basically correcting the sermon that we heard and making sure that we understood the right way to view that passage rather than what the pastor told us. And there was all of that, oh, well, those are lukewarm Christians. So obviously you can't do anything with them because they're the lukewarm ones. And there's just all of this no true Scotsman thing. You're not a Christian unless you believe exactly the same way I do.
I remember it was like routine for me. It was like every time I got out of church, I was asked what I was being taught, and then I would tell them what like the lesson was today or whatever, and then it would be like the lecture of, oh, well, actually they got this, this, and this wrong. And then it would either be, depending on the church, lukewarm Christians, or it would be, well, they're just a little crazy. So they're not all right in the head. You're just there for fellowship. And that was specifically more for the Pentecostal church that I went to. Of course.
So anyways, this cobbled together set of directions. So attend the full seminar, ask God, review the principles, so go back to the full seminar stuff, and then ask your authority for direction. Which, if you're anything other than a father, it means going to your father. They have suggestions on how to run this as an ongoing seminar with your kids at home. Provide at least 4 or 5 days after the seminar to rethink and restudy the principles presented, which was something you do for any training you go to. That's, again, innocuous information given, but Ask your authority. Often a father or husband is grieved when one under his authority goes to someone else for counsel before coming to him. And so God may use your need to motivate him to seek the Lord in a deeper way.
God gives you problems so that your husband can fix them and make him stronger with
No,
God.
see, God gives you problems so that way you have to go to God to fix the problem.
My brain just starts reading.
Follow the light you have. This one really takes the cake. It says, often a person has enough direction for the next step and finds when taking it that God then reveals enough light for further steps. Light received brings more light. Light rejected brings darkness. And let's just remember how this has been changed in, well, actually, I don't even want to say changed. I want to say this was probably about the same time, just slightly different circles. They came up with, God does not call the qualified, he qualifies the called.
I was gonna say, this is weird in this context because I know they're very big on don't trust your own intuition at all. But like they're almost, I feel like, gaslighting people into thinking that their intuition is God here.
Yes.
Because I don't know what else follow the light you have is supposed to mean, but aside from that.
In the context of the 70s, saying follow the light you have really feels like it was either born out of Bill Gothard's tinkering in the free love generation, or trying to call out to those people, hoping to pull them into his fundamentalism by putting buzzwords like that on it.
Like that. That's what I was thinking too.
Building trust in our designer and our acceptance of self.
Oh boy.
Yes. This I'm going to give a quick contents warning. We are about to get into some severe ableism.
Oh, can't wait.
And as you can see,
Okay.
there's little bits of pencil in there. They're comparing things like people upset about disfigurements, missing limbs, etc. And I'm too tall. I feel like these people just do not understand that everything is not the same. There are degrees here.
This is giving big Virgin versus Chad meme vibes right now. Even though those drawings look almost like identical, except one has blonde hair and the other has black hair for some reason.
Were you around for Goofus and Gallant?
I was not.
Okay, I'm gonna pull this up because you need to see this. All right, so Goofus and Gallant were basically like good idea, bad idea, but way, way older. So you'll have, I wish I had no little brother. I'm glad I have a little brother. Let me see it. Or may I see it? Goofus throws stones at birds. Gallant scatters feed for the birds. So it was very, very polar opposites. This is bad, this is good. And that is what I'm feeling in this section of the basic seminar.
Yeah, it's
Right development. The grammar in this shit is so bad. Right development means comparing ourselves with the inward character of Christ Jesus in order to receive God's approval. Now, forgive me, but this bumps right up against the whole nothing you can do will make you acceptable to God. It is grace alone, it is faith alone, it is blood alone. And this is a spot where I think he says the quiet part out loud, because this idea is present everywhere. It's not just IBLP, but they don't outright say it like this. They don't say, do this in order to get God's approval. They will say it in much more couched terms of, it's not that we do this to receive God's approval, but a faith without works is dead.
exactly.
Again, just saying the quiet part out loud, just being real freaking brazen about it.
Wild, to be honest.
So wrong development is measuring ourselves with the outward standards of those around us in order to gain their approval. Now, I submit that there is a third option where we do not compare ourselves with others or with external standards. We look at what our values are, what our goals are, and we seek to live a life that is ethical and moral based on what we believe about ourselves. And
Well, no, we can't have that because that makes more sense.
well, yes, I'm saying that as an ex-evangelical. I would have never said that when I was in the church. I'm pretty sure I practiced being at gunpoint saying, yes, I believe in God, and not saying stuff like that. I do appreciate that they say it is not a good idea to compare yourself with other people, but note they don't say comparing yourself with other people. They say measuring ourselves with the outward standards, doing the whitewashed tomb thing, where outside you're pretty and on the inside you're ugly. And I agree that, yeah, it's not good to just put on falsities on the outside and be a nasty person inside, but here we are talking about Bill Gothard.
Exactly.
They get into self-rejection. And their definition of this is grade A mental gymnastics. So, evidence of self-rejection is your over-attention on clothes. So you are using clothes to compensate or cover up unchangeable physical features which you are rejecting about yourself. We all dress for our bodies, and we want to wear something that makes us feel good. And so the whole trend with women's dresses that have the weird cutouts in flabby parts of the body, that's doing no one any favors, and nobody wears those. That's why it's going away. But we, generally speaking, are going to be dressing in ways that make us feel good about ourselves and our body. Whether that is more about the way that we are presenting to others, or whether it is just the way a particular outfit or garment makes you feel. We are absolutely doing that, but that's not a bad thing. That's not rejecting yourself. Granted, I will say the trans hoodie is a real phenomenon, and we need to stop hiding in our black hoodies in the middle of summer when it's 108 degrees. Just out of safety concerns, we need to stop doing this. I have a Green Bay Packers hoodie that I have literally lived in for like 7 years. It is my security blanket. I will not be taking questions. So I dislike that they are basically saying you have to wear what we tell you to wear, whether that makes you feel good about yourself or not.
On one hand, like, I am someone who wore like extremely baggy clothing for like years solely because like I hated the way I look. I've transitioned from that to just looking completely like wild every time I leave the house
Yes.
solely because it makes me happy.
Right.
Like sometimes I want to just like walk to McDonald's cosplaying as a Monster High character, and that's just because it makes me happy.
You know?
And like I don't see what's wrong with that.
There's zero wrong with that. I'm sorry, but
I don't care about the approval of others. I
Yeah.
think I scare others a little bit. It makes
That's-
me happy.
that's not always a bad thing. But you know, this whole concept of you can't play with clothing to see what your style is or what makes you feel good, because you can't even really like reckon with your own insecurities about things until you try some stuff.
And that's been like a big one for me over the years, like especially after like leaving like my abusive household, because I actually finally was able to do fully whatever I wanted to with like my physical appearance. And I genuinely feel like I can leave the house now and communicate with other people. A year or two ago, even if I had the knowledge to, I literally wouldn't have been able to just because of how insecure I was constantly.
Right. And I mean, granted, yes, we do want to be gentle with insecurities. We do want to investigate those to a certain extent, just to try and be more authentically ourselves and not hiding. Because that's not good either. But I dislike that they are calling it a self-rejection, because it's not a self-rejection, it's a trying to accept yourself and trying to cobble together things around you that will help you accept yourself.
No, exactly. And I mean, these people certainly don't want you to walk around naked.
No.
But in general society, it's also not very acceptable to just walk around naked. So, what do you expect people to do with their clothing then? Like, you're saying like people shouldn't express themselves through it, but also like I don't know. It just the logic here doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well,
Like,
I feel like within the Quiverful movement, more specifically the IBLP, they definitely want people to be wearing matching clothes. And this went beyond like his choirs that he'd put together and stuff, because I'm used to them always like performing in whatever, because I did that in show choir. It's just what you do. But in your
yeah.
like day-to-day dress, they wanted people to look the same. But the B here, like, as a person who exists under the T in LGBT, B really butters my biscuits. It says, if we reject God's basic design in making us, it may then also be difficult to put confidence in the designer for other areas of our life. I don't think that God necessarily messed up when making me. I don't think God made a mistake in me. In the spiritual experiences that I have had over my life, I have been continually reminded that he has made me unique, that he has made me with a purpose, that he has made me with specific things that are different from other people, and that's for a purpose, and that's for a good purpose. And I don't think that me going from using she, her pronouns to they, them pronouns is saying that I don't trust God. What I'm saying is I disagree with the arbitrary structures that are utilized to assign a gender binary. I disagree with the labeling that humans are giving me. It has nothing to do with my ability to trust God or believe that God made me the right way.
Exactly.
When I was struggling as a teenager in evangelicalism, in fundamentalist evangelicalism, that was struggling with being gay, I spent 10 years from when I was 8 to when I was 18 asking God to fix me and make me straight. And when I finally got out of that and started looking at things from a different perspective, I was like, maybe it isn't that God gave me a quote unquote cross to bear for the rest of my life. Maybe God made me that way, and trying to be straight is what is not trusting God.
I actually went through kind of a similar thing too, like around the time I was 13. It was like when I was kind of coming out of my weird psychotic breakdown.
Oh,
I'm sorry,
fun.
this doesn't make a lot of sense to people who like are just watching, like know nothing about me. No, I had like really bad like religious psychosis when I was like 12, 13. But that was sort of the conclusion I kind of came to as well, where I was like, me constantly forcing myself to try to like be something I'm not might actually be like what's causing me issues here. And maybe God didn't just curse me.
Exactly. It's not that God hates me. It's that unfortunately I have power structures around me that disagree with anything outside of their specific model. So, So we've also got excessive shyness, because clearly that's a problem. Difficulty in loving others. We are to love our neighbor as we do ourselves. Thus, if we cannot love ourselves in the right way, we will also find it difficult to love others in the right way.
If you can't love yourself, how in the hell you gonna love somebody else?
I really feel like this point is missed on all the conservative evangelicals, because you love yourself enough to demand parental autonomy. However, you want to strip parents who disagree with you of their parental rights. You want your beliefs to override the autonomy of someone else who is raising their own child completely separate of yours. It's really hard to say that you are loving someone when you are actively involved in not just socially stigmatizing that person and their family, but literally making it illegal.
Oh, and I mean, if you go on like conservative Facebook, I mean, the constant, like, I mean, quote unquote jokes about like unaliving people they disagree with, it's a little.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly engaged in a modicum of that with my friends when I was in my early 20s and I was going through my like rage era, but I never would have thought of myself in those times as being someone who was loving others. I was just mad at the world and I didn't
Oh, yeah.
care that I was being unloving.
Same here. Like, I don't think I kind of hated everybody. And the thing is, though, I never deluded myself into thinking I was some sort of, like, amazing person. I mean, in certain areas, I guess I did, but, like, I never considered myself being exceptionally loving.
And then we have self-criticism, so more complaints about unchangeable physical features, abilities, parentage, social heritage, like whatever the that's supposed to mean. I'm guessing it means ethnicities and nationality,
Yeah, I
but
don't know why they worded it like that. That's
I mean, it's a group full of white people. Like, it is exceedingly rare to find a person of color within the IBLP. We have perfectionism. It is healthy to a certain degree to keep improving on what we have done, but when the time expended outweighs the value of the accomplishment, then it is an unhealthy evidence of self-rejection. Or, I don't know, come with me here, possibly an ADHD hyperfixation.
exactly. Or special interest.
It doesn't have to have some immense value. I love watching sci-fi that has to do with genetics and epigenetics and eugenesis and splicing alien DNA into us. So yeah, I love all of that stuff, right? There is zero value to the accomplishment. I guess I'll know what's going on when the aliens invade, but yeah, I mean, really, there is no accomplishment to that. And I spend inordinate amounts of time on it. Do you know why? It makes me happy.
No, like mine, which like I don't even know if I need to say this, but like every few months I'll get like the itch to binge watch Rick and Morty again, obsessively because I absolutely love that show. I don't think the last two seasons were bad. People can fight me on it. I also am an alcoholic who is extremely jaded because a loved one of mine passed away, so I am a bit of a Rick Kinney. Does that affect anything? No, it just makes me happy. I enjoy watching it and it makes me laugh, even though it's really stupid.
I can't even tell you how many times I rewatched The Venture Brothers, and there's absolutely no redeeming quality to spending weeks on end watching The Venture Brothers.
Or it'll
It's
be like
fun.
me for like 9 hours. Like I
Oh,
don't do anything cool with it.
don't
I'm not
at
one of
me.
those people that no, I'm not one of those people that even upload stuff to the gallery because I use too much custom content.
Then we have the attitudes of superiority. Again, the irony is thick in here. If we would boast of our achievements or use words outside our vocabulary, or if we would refuse to associate with certain classes of people, we would be exhibiting outward indications of both pride and inferiority. Whatever we have is from God, therefore, why dost thou glory if thou hast not received it? I hate that verse so much.
Same.
So much. It doesn't even make any goddamn sense. Like, no, of course you're not going to glory in something you don't have. I wasn't excited about my floor-length fleece until I actually had it.
Exactly.
I don't understand why they feel like they need to spell out things that are just obviously. But
Especially back when this was written. This was before online shopping. So like
correct.
what?
Oh my god, it's ridiculous. But what's really funny about this is that people within the IBLP absolutely look down on people who are outside of the IBLP. They would tell them,
Yep.
Jim, Bob, and Michelle are on camera saying that you wouldn't have these problems in your family if you just went to the IBLP seminars. They take all the credit whenever there is any to be had and take none of the accountability.
Yep.
So, more about God uses things like our appearance, parentage, and social heritage. Again, I'm guessing that has to do with wealth, ethnicity, etc. They're God's special frames to highlight and amplify his unique message through us. Now, keep in mind that we are not unique. His message is unique.
I'm sorry, I feel like when they say social heritage, they're just referring to the occasional Italian that joins the high.
It's so couched in this dog whistle language that was extremely prevalent in these circles because, well, it's not like they were available for free online for millions of people to look at and actually give feedback on. No, it was just people in little isolated sections of Christianity that specifically paid thousands of dollars to listen to him. Of course, they're not going to say anything bad about it. And here is where we get into that core anxiety that every child has. Am I saved? Because God's reputation is at stake in what we do with even our appearance. God is so big that he can cleanse the world of all unrighteousness, yet he is so small that he could be tainted by a girl wearing spaghetti straps.
It's not even just that, too, but like abilities. Like if somebody just wants to, I don't know, take a break from something that they're like good at or whatever, that's that's hurting God's reputation.
Or having special abilities and
Yep.
being special. I hate that word in that context with the fire of 1,000 suns. Now, here is how we are to get to self-acceptance. Aren't you glad they're going to tell us?
Oh, yes.
We detect ungratefulness towards God. That's the first thing. And so they give you a project, because again, they're very big on having projects for everything. Make a list of all the changes you would like to make in your appearance, abilities, family, or social heritage. Correct what you can, and list benefits for what you cannot change. I'm sorry, I am allowed to say that there are things in my life, whether it be a disability, whether it be socioeconomic class, whatever. I can say those are objectively not cool. I would love for those to change, and there really isn't a benefit to them not changing.
Like, especially the family shit. I'm sorry, there are literally no benefits to any of it. I feel like this is something that secular people do sometimes too.
Yes.
Like, you see it a lot in really toxic trauma recovery circles, where it's like a big emphasis on being grateful for the bad
Yes.
you
It
do, for
made
making
you stronger. F you. No, it did not.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you're supposed to thank God for the way he has made you thus far, especially for that which you wanted to change but cannot. This, if I had read this as a teenager, would have. Because
God.
I'd be like, how am I supposed to thank God for giving me a sin nature that makes me want to be gay when I know I'm supposed to be straight, but I can't change that? What is the benefit here? Who anywhere is going to benefit from this?
Exactly. I can't with these people.
I love this part. Put yourself back on God's easel and purpose to cooperate with him in developing inward qualities. How about you just work towards having more self-awareness and compassion without it being God's easel? It's you are actively making changes in your life to accomplish certain personal growth. That sounds like you putting yourself on an easel. Like you are on your own easel.
Oh, exactly. It's so counterproductive, period. To I get that it's beneficial for some people to some extent to have religion and everything. I understand, I get it, but it's so counterproductive to put all of your self-worth and self-esteem onto something else, no matter what it is.
Exactly.
Even if it's like, I personally, just coming from experience, I don't even think it's healthy to put your self-worth on projects you're working on. And like,
No.
it's just really not.
No, because then you are the product that you can make. And
Exactly.
it is no longer you as a person, it is what good are you to others. And while there is a certain amount of, yeah, we should all be kind of a cooperative organism working together, but at the same time, there's a spectrum, and they refuse to acknowledge a spectrum. There is a box, and you better fit in it. Here we go. If God prescribes us before we are born, what about man's intervention, which actually affects the child's appearance or abilities? Now, they are not talking about eugenics. They're talking about scars and deformities caused by birth injuries.
Talking about circumcision for a minute, and I was gonna this was a thing with them, but
It's thankfully waning because even as a Jewish person, I am not a fan of unnecessary body modification on children who cannot consent to it. Abnormal social development. We have visible symptoms of a wounded spirit. So communication breakdown, then ungratefulness, then stubbornness, then open rebellion, then wrong friends, then defense of sensuality, then condemnation of others, then frivolity and depression.
I don't. Oh my god.
Like, none of that carries from one to another.
So bizarre. I feel like this was this written about a specific situation?
No,
Like,
this is
author
just in
saw-
general. Oh, Bill Gothard also loves to give personal anecdotes, so he'll tell stories about somebody that he knew. Now, granted, those people are never identified. We truly do not know if they actually exist in reality, but he loves talking about them. And of course, they're always perfect examples of whatever he's trying to convince people of. Seems sus. The beginning is silent at the dinner table, and that indicates that they have a wounded spirit. Or it could be you have
excuse me,
nothing to talk
silence
about.
at the dinner table, etc.
I don't, that's not a communication breakdown. Like, a communication breakdown is when you're trying to explain abnormal social development and you just give a random word salad of 8 things that you dislike. And
put them in like a weirdly specific order that just
Yeah.
doesn't really make a lot of sense.
if you are in open rebellion, and I love how open rebellion equates to desires equal voice with parents, but that open rebellion is like 2 steps before wrong friends, which any evangelical parent will tell you. The wrong friends lead to open rebellion. And then the condemnation of others, that's just gaslighting victims. I'm calling you a hypocrite because you are one, and you're like, oh, you're being condemning.
No, exactly. And then the depression part at the end is just
Right. Rebellion does not necessarily result in depression. Typically, the depression came first, and it was out of a desire to continue living and to actually live a life that you want, that you actually go into open rebellion.
Exactly.
I
And also desires equal voice with their parents.
Because what's funny is this never stipulates whether this relationship should change after children become adults. In most cases, they will actually say it will definitely be still in play while they are adults because they're still under your umbrella of authority until they get married. And even then, they're only a half step out from it, so you still exert a lot of control.
I've noticed that especially like with the men in these circles too, because like with the women, they submit to their husbands, but like the son still has to submit to their father to some weird degree.
Yep, that's
usually
why they usually work for their dads. But I love they have 4 basic structures of authority. These are not structures of authority. These are examples of relationships. A basic structure of authority in government is like representative democracy, or being able to vote when you turn 18 and become part of the voting populace that determines those representatives. It's not national leaders, then local officials, then citizens. Like, the citizens elect all of those people above them. And while, yes, I have fought for decades with my senator about how he needs to actually step up and do something for veterans, because he loves talking about veterans. He loves being seen at the VA. But does he actually do anything to increase homeless shelters for them, to open up more pathways to mental health care or medical care for them? No, of course not. And so I have argued with him at length for decades, and I get nowhere with him. Clearly he's in charge, and I, as a single person, do not have control over him. But that's the point. It's supposed to be a group of people coming together with a mandate for the people that are in office.
I'm not even trying to be mean, but like, I feel like this whole thing was written by a fourth grader. I don't.
You know, this is coming from the man who said his ATI wisdom booklet curriculum would not just suffice for elementary and high school education. It was also going to be the analog of multiple 2-year degrees and a pre-law degree. I'm sorry, but logical fallacies are a 101 class when you're in pre-law, pre-med, philosophy, history, anything like that. And my philosophy professor would love to have a word. The people that put this together as far as logical fallacies go. Because as much as he was a conservative Christian professor at a fundamentalist evangelical university, he was the first teacher that I ever had, which, shocker, I was homeschooled, so he was literally like my second teacher. But he was the first teacher that actually gave me the room and permission to actually come to my own conclusion and support it with the facts that I find. He disagreed with almost every single premise I had in a paper I wrote for him, but I got A's because I supported them well. And, you know, that's a teacher. This bullshit here is nothing more than submission to, again, arbitrary authorities.
It's just, oh my god. And then I'm looking down at the thoughts of unaliving too, the moral one in specifics. It's just because I don't know why I'm acting shocked by that, but it's because these people do view anyone who leaves their circles as basically dead to them. But it's just, wow.
3 phases of loss in rebellion. His children would lose the heritage they could have had. Because he's talking about King Saul. So King Saul did bad, and so it was visited upon the sons and the sons of sons and begats, and his own ministry would suffer, his physical life would be shortened. Clearly, because Saul is a perfect example of why we should not rebel, because he saw bad things happen. And you do realize that bad things happen to people even when they do it all the right way, right?
No, exactly. I'm sorry, my brain is just staring at the teen dash ager, and I can't stop looking at it.
Again, I said the grammar is horrible, but yet this is a man who thinks he is qualified to write his own homeschool curriculum.
I suffered severe education neglect growing up, and I really, like, whatever reason, my brain just doesn't want to focus on the biggest elephant in the room, which is my spelling. I'm working on everything else but that, pretty much.
You gotta pick your battles.
Like,
you can't do all the things at once.
Exactly. I don't even think I could produce something this bad.
Autocorrect would catch half of this stuff.
Exactly.
We talk about this authority, go to the seminar, then consult God, then look at the principles of the seminar, then consult your pastor. Like, this whole authority over biblical adherence. This is perfect example of this. An 18-year-old boy plans to go into the ministry. He prays about what college to attend and finally chooses a top-ranking Bible college. His parents fail to comprehend the importance of either the ministry or the biblical education, and they threaten to withhold all college funds unless he attends a nearby university. Their counsel to him is that if he learns another profession first, he can always have something to fall back on if he fails in the ministry. The son's points are that he doesn't plan to fail in the ministry and that he needs the Bible training. What do you think Bill Gothard would tell this boy to do?
Obey the parents, I assume. Maybe. I really don't.
The father of the 18-year-old boy, detected in his son attitudes of ungratefulness, stubbornness, and insensitivity to the feelings of others. Even though the father wasn't a Christian, he realized that these attitudes would cause his son to fail in the ministry. The very fact that his father had apprehensions of his failure in the ministry should have been a significant indication to the son. A proper response to his father's counsel would have been an essential step in developing these qualities. Even when you want to go into ministry, you want to study the Bible, that's not good enough.
No, you still gotta obey the parents. We still gotta do the weird power structure bullshit.
This is what was harped on. I don't even want to say harped. Like, it was a valid thing to bring up over and over and over again in Shiny Happy People, talking about these authoritarian power structures, a blind adherence to an arbitrary authority. There is nothing that makes Bill Gothard special. He was able to get people to sign on to this arbitrary authoritarian power structure because the dads got off on being masters of their own domain. Oh, the fact that they had to buy into the rest of Bill Gothard's bullshit to get that power, that was an acceptable compromise.
I'm genuinely surprised my family never got really into this bullshit. Grandfather would have, hopped on.
I have who was involved in IBLP in the 80s. And in that family, one of the brothers complained that their sister, who was entering puberty, was being distracting because she wasn't wearing a bra yet. And she really needed to be forced to wear a bra.
Jesus Christ.
That is not normal. There is this just extreme fixation on sexuality to a damaging level, and it is wallpapered over with this happy Christian, your family will be perfect if you do this, and it's like, yo, those kinds of things coming out of a 10-year-old's mouth, that's not okay. There's something very fundamentally wrong there. This is not a successful thing unless your success is measured by how well do you raise predators.
Exactly.
This blind devotion here, which unfortunately is a common theme in all of evangelicalism, because you're supposed to believe that the translation that you use is 100% accurate to the point of scriptural literalism, that every single jot and tittle is correct. Even though you can get numerous versions of the Bible and they all say different things, that's not a problem. It just requires some extra mental gymnastics. Here's the teenager again, who began to secretly attend a nearby church, had previously developed the attitudes of rebellion and self-will towards her mother. Her mother said not to go to church. She went to church anyways. She's the problem because she was disobedient. I mean, part of me says stuff like this is a wide divide between IBLP and the majority of evangelicalism. Yeah. But then there's other parts where it's literally indecipherable which side it came from. And it's this really weird combination of completely mainstream beliefs for the 80s at least, and this just wild cult stuff.
Reading this, I instantly thought of that one subplot in God's Not Dead where
Which one?
The Muslim girl decided she wanted to be a Christian.
Yeah.
And they didn't even give her like an actual hijab. They gave her like a scarf.
Yes,
Like-
correct, correct. It was not even close to a real hijab. Not that I would expect them to pay enough attention to know the difference. I have been asked if I am Muslim while wearing a tishul, which is a Jewish head covering, and it looks nothing like a hijab.
Those don't look the same at all. I don't know, maybe I'm like just too educated on it, but like, it always makes me cringe when people like, I don't know, get them mixed up so bad.
Or the
Or,
Sikh
like-
versus Muslim. That one,
Yeah.
that's an especially ironic one because if you actually knew the history of the Muslims and the Sikhs, you would know that it's basically like saying the Irish and the Scottish are the same thing.
Exactly.
Yes, they come from the same part of the world, but they will die a bitter death before they tell you they are anything like the other people.
Exactly.
This girl wanted to get married. Parents didn't like the guy that she wanted to marry. Here's what she should have done. Discuss with her parents the qualities she should look for in a husband. Because, of course, it doesn't matter what you want out of a husband, just what your parents want out of a husband. Give her parents ample opportunity to become acquainted with the boyfriend before there was any discussion of marriage. I failed on that one. I eloped the second time around, and the first time around, I definitely got engaged without him seeking their prior approval because, you know what, they don't own me. I am not a camel. She should ask her parents to point out areas where both she and her boyfriend could improve, because, you know, that's gonna go well. Request that her parents set up guidelines to help her discern whether she has met the right life partner. Now, there are certainly things to be said for giving advice to people who are new to relationships. I've been in the polyamorous community for over 20 years, so I give a lot of advice about polyamory. I see a lot of the common newbie mistakes, right? And so I typically have kind of a spiel that I go over. I can give general ideas of boundaries, not rules. And polyamory is not a team sport. Expect that there are going to be times when you're playing separately. And you don't have to know about your insecurities before they pop up, but you do need to responsibly take care of your reactions to insecurities and not expect other people to fix it for you. Just general stuff. It's not a he needs to have an 850 credit score, or you need to only be polyamorous if you have a guest room so your other boyfriend or girlfriend can stay over. Those are just entirely too situational, and everybody has different living arrangements and marital arrangements, and it's too diverse to really pin those down. But then you have the evangelicals who think there truly is a prescribed, I say this all the time, but secret sauce to make a marriage work. So you've got to make sure that he is in the Word. Has he read through the whole Bible in the last year? If not, reconsider. Does he go to a church that is of the same denomination as your parents? If not, might need to reconsider.
No, exactly. It's just kind of wild to me.
For the guy that wanted to become a preacher, he should accept the challenge of motivating new spiritual interests within his father.
God damn.
It shouldn't be your problem to fix your parents and make them interested in what you are interested in.
Again, it feels like a fourth grader wrote this. Are they really going to pretend that the people, and if this were an actual situation, that these weren't things that they likely already have thought of doing?
Exactly.
Teen age.
Do not do a shot every time there is an improper hyphen or comma or semicolon or colon in this book. It's a bad idea. Anyways, for the girl who was going to church on the sly and mom found out about it, she should ask forgiveness of her mother for past attitudes and actions which were wrong. Those attitudes and actions being ungratefulness at the way that her mother was raising her, not listening to her authority, and lying. The hell?
I don't. What the are these people on?
At least half of this stuff is in name only. They're not actually doing this.
No, this makes even God, employer, employee. What am I looking at right
Yes,
now?
yes. Oh, I love that when they're talking about the employer-employee relationship and how you should submit to your employer. I'm sorry, they are paying me for my expertise. They are paying me for my training, what I bring to their company.
Exactly.
I am not their slave. But of course, they use verses that have to do with slavery. Servants, obey in all things those who are your masters. Because chattel slavery and capitalistic hellscape in the 2000s really is pretty much the same thing. So I guess, and I mean, work as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. I still need to pay my bills. Because while I might have mansions in heaven, I still got to pay for my 2-bedroom apartment.
Honestly, I feel like people should just take that graphic and bring it into their boss anytime they have a complaint or like something's going on at work and find a Bible verse to just zing them with and tell them that God is above them as an employer.
This is the focus on the family as an employer challenge. Go. This is another one of his wonderful graphs that makes absolutely no sense. Now, I'm not including the couple of pages of explanation that go along with it, but just trust me when I say it does not actually explain anything.
This doesn't make it God, family, relative.
Basically, if you're talking about having a clear conscience, you should worry first about the things that you do to God. Secondly, about things you do to family. Thirdly, things that you do to relatives, which I thought were family, but apparently they're not. Your employers and teachers. And then former friends. You're not allowed any current friends, just former friends. And then everybody else. Apparently, your current friends get apologies from you after your former friends and your employers.
No current friend, and then also just family twice for some reason. I
Right?
think they meant immediate family.
And this is why I always tell people, make sure you're getting your homeschool curriculum from an actual publisher, not somebody's like, hey, we publish our own. No, do not buy from the Rodriguez. Now, the balance of guilt. It is our natural inclination to find other people or circumstances which are to blame for what we have done in order to justify, excuse our offenses. The greater our guilt, the more we must blame. The resulting bitterness and guilt are devastating to our mental and emotional balance. Again, this is one of the parts that could be okay if it didn't have the greater context around it, but they are basically saying, and they go on to expound on this in other books that he wrote, the part where they're saying you're just looking to blame other people, that's what they say to people who are upset that they were SA'd or they experienced child abuse or domestic violence. You're not supposed to blame these other people for that. Clearly you did something to bring this on yourself.
Exactly.
And I cannot stand that bullshit. That has been the general Christian sentiment coming out after Shiny Happy People. They're just looking to blame people. They're miserable. Well, they're talking and recounting child abuse. You think they should be giggling while they do it, Morgan?
Because I literally have no other way to cope other than to just laugh at how my childhood was.
That is acceptable. That is fair. These are complaints that you might have about your parents that you should really be looking for God's blessing in. Like these things that happen to you, you should be looking at why God is putting you through that challenge, making promises that they do not keep, punishing me for things I did not do, giving more attention and love to other family members, telling me not to do things that I see them doing, taking their frustrations out on me, expecting too much work from me at home and not being there when I need them. I'm sorry, but those are things you should be able to count on your parents for.
That's just kind of basic parenting to not.
Don't be a dick. It applies to adult relationships and parent relationships. Just don't be a dick. That's gonna get you far ways away, and it won't take you 157 pages to read that. Oh boy, here's another fabulous graph that makes no goddamn sense.
Love, hate, truth, deceit, justice. Oh my god. No, I really hate how they're writing it on the side like that, or vertically, doing it in the middle of the page. That is so ugly.
This one sort of makes better sense than the last one. You have reproofs from scripture coming from the one side and reproofs from life coming from the other side. However, just like with the other one, the two sides are coordinated. So all of these people, parents, relatives, government, I guess children and enemies, no, but the rest of these are mostly like umbrellas of authority that you would be under. So the reproofs from them.
It's so weird, like, that the parents is under the reproofs from life section, because so much of this is just telling children to disobey what most people would consider disobeying God, even just for the sake of obeying their parents.
Correct. And that's so weird because I love how they have parents next to hate, parents next to deceit, to unfairness, to impurity, to bitterness. Again, saying the quiet part out loud without intending to.
It's just fucking bizarre.
Here is one of his anecdotal story, and this one's a journey. A Christian businessman hired a Christian contractor to build a house for him. The businessman specifically instructed the contractor not to hire a certain mason because he felt he would do inferior work. Several weeks later, the businessman came to inspect the progress of his house. To his amazement and anger, he found that the mason contractor, whom he did not want, had been hired. In a heated discussion with the Christian contractor, he expressed his displeasure at what had been done. Other subcontract work was, in the opinion of the businessman, quite unsatisfactory and had to be corrected at extra expense. This led to further heated disagreement, so that when a final bill was presented, it was refused. For 7 years, the businessman ignored the $1,300 statement which he had received from the contractor. $1,300 for a whole goddamn house.
Also, it's just like, why did he even have to give a number? What the what
Exactly.
is
It's like when people lie and they give you way too many details. Both men became active in youth work, and one day they both discovered each other at an area youth conference. They avoided one another as much as possible for several meetings. Finally, the conviction became so great on both sides that they met together after a meeting. The businessman acknowledged that he was wrong in his anger and lack of Christian testimony, and that his asking forgiveness was to be backed up by his pocketbook. He asked the contractor to send him a new bill, and he would pay it. Later, he assured me that he did not have the money to pay the account in full, at least at that time. Within a week, the contractor, who assured me he had never expected to receive the money, sent a new statement. In rechecking my bills for the job on your house, I believe that if you would discount my original bill by 1/2, it would cover my expenses. This meant that the businessman had to raise $650 in order to clear his conscience. He gathered together $100 for the first installment and sent it to the contractor. 3 days later, he received a letter from his employer. The letter began with the statement, "We are happy to inform you that because of your record, the enclosed bonus check is being sent to you." In the letter was a bonus check for $1,310. Not only did the Lord pay the $650 to the contractor, he gave an equal amount to the businessman, plus $10. When I heard this, I could hardly contain myself for joy. I was therefore rather surprised that the businessman was not as enthusiastic as I was. He did not associate the check as God's provision for the debt, but instead thought, well, I expected a bonus, although I didn't know how much it would be. 1 year later, he was also expecting a bonus check. He thought it would be about $1,000. Just before the end of the year, it seemed God wanted to clarify that the $1,310 really had come from him. He sent an electrical storm which struck the steeple and roof of a church insured by the businessman, and in that one claim, his bonus check for the entire year was practically wiped out.
I feel like this is like his weird attempt at writing a parable of some kind.
Everybody has their own particular fanfic that they like to write. I didn't realize his had to do with math.
What is the point of
And
this?
he not only got the $650 for the contractor, but he gave an equal amount to the businessman. Well, sure, only if the businessman only pays half of his balance. If he paid the whole balance, he'd have $10. Woo! Could buy a couple packs of smokes with that.
It's just so weird.
Sorry, but $1,300 for a whole house that includes masonry? Sir.
I don't think that's how it works.
Perhaps this is just me not realizing how dirt cheap stuff was in the 70s, but I'm pretty sure houses
still
cost
seems
more
like
than
a lot.
$1,500. This is a child's rebellious spirit saying, my parents won't understand. And they go to Abraham sacrificing Isaac.
Dear God.
Like one of the most universally understood to be shitty things in the Old Testament, like forcing a guy to sacrifice his son that was promised to him and was a miracle and everything, just because God said so. Not for any particular outcome, just because God said so. And can you believe that Sarah would not have necessarily understood that, but she obeyed anyways? And I love how they say that she immediately obeyed God's word. She obeyed what her husband told her. She did not directly speak to God in the story. If a parent stops you in your attempt to make something right, you must follow his direction. Oh, yes, he's talking about his own mother now.
Oh boy, I'm sure this will be interesting.
Freud would have a field day.
I was just gonna say that.
It was most helpful to picture each Christian as an uncut jewel and our parents as God's tools to chip off the rough edges so that the finest facets of the jewel may become visible. God knew I needed my family to chip off the rough edges of my personality. The idea that I needed to acknowledge to my mother that I had had the wrong attitude toward her, I needed to ask her for forgiveness for this, was not an easy pill to swallow. My pride had blinded me to my own wrong. I had justified myself by feeling that my mother was mostly wrong. The concept of God's chain of command made sense, and it made me uncomfortable too.
Exclamation mark.
And it's like, well, maybe because you were having to listen to a woman. Gasp! Bill Gothard does not listen to women. Ah, yes, another fabulous infographic. According to Bill Gothard, you should ask for forgiveness by level of offense. You need to clear out all of the greatest offenses before you can move on to lower ones. Perhaps I'm weird, but I would think it's easier to start by asking forgiveness on the simple things and work your way up to the really difficult conversations of asking somebody with a greatest offense.
I feel like I'm really stupid for having a hard time understanding this infograph, but like,
No.
I'm not.
Like the left side sort of makes sense. Like it at least is a greatest offense, least offense. Like you're moving down, and supposedly your level of guilt for the least offense is less than that of the greatest offense. And I would say in broad strokes that's probably correct. The wrong way is the most convoluted thing. I don't even know what this little circular thing at the bottom is supposed to be. And what the is a floating conviction? And again, the pages surrounding this do not explain that. It just simply says that it's wrong because it's a floating conviction. And I'm like, but define your terms, man.
It's arrows and flowers.
And yes, sometimes you do have abnormal guilt over trivial offenses. And you know what? That's called anxiety. We have therapists for that. But
I have two for that.
oh my God. The conviction goes down, comes to the greatest offense, and then goes to the side and all the way down to the bottom.
I'm probably going to get my entire project that I need to get done just tonight now because I can't do worse than this.
No. I think the only person who could write worse diagrams would be Paul, who thinks you can learn sex ed from stick figures.
God, I would actually give him money to do that. I think we need to set up a GoFundMe. I want Paul to write a sex education book.
Oh, do you remember the South Park episode where the internet dries up and nobody in America has internet?
Yes.
Like nobody in the world has internet, right? And so they're in this like Depression era camp, and there is a simulator, and it's literally just somebody behind this curtain that is drawing stick figures doing things and then dropping it down and be like, see?
Internet porn simulator. Give it a try. Japanese girls exchanging bodily fluids. Click. Oh, this sucks. I can't jack off to this. Damn it. Brazilian fart fetish porn? Click. Nope. No, this isn't gonna work.
That apparently is acceptable to Paul. I don't think the Brazilian fart fetish is, but the diagrams at least were fine.
God damn. Oh my god.
Oh, confess only to those offended. Now, here is one of the early signals of his problems with taking accountability. He did not want to tell everybody what he had done wrong. He only needed to tell those he offended, because it is both inappropriate and potentially harmful to extend the confession to persons outside of the circle of offense.
Jesus Christ, that is so...
Yes, and this is why so many of these girls were not able to speak up and say they were being abused by him. Because if he were to confess anything, it would only be to them, and who's going to believe them over Bill Gothard?
That is so messed up, dude.
And here's where he tells us to clear the greatest offenses first. We have a dangerous tendency to take care of minor offenses before we take care of major offenses. Invariably, this produces a floating guilt, which then becomes attached to trivial offenses and produces an abnormal sense of guilt. So I guess floating guilt is that you feel bad about simple stuff because you haven't sought forgiveness for the bad stuff, and I'm pretty sure that that's not how that works. Like,
prime reason why this man should not be writing like any self-help, if we're like, when a like really toxic person, and I don't mean that like a bad way, but like, I guess I do, you know what I mean, somebody who has done like a lot of really messed up crap goes to a therapist, they are going to be given the exact opposite advice to this. Like, if somebody's made a lot of not so great choices, typically they're going to say, well, you should probably work on maybe learning to forgive yourself and apologize to other people for smaller things, as opposed to like trying to fix literally everything overnight, and that's just going to lead you to feeling more like crap.
Exactly.
Even in the time period this was written, I feel like that's just been basic knowledge for years.
You know, I'm not entirely certain about that, because at a game night that I had a couple years ago, we played a game called Therapy, which was made in the early 1980s, and it's kind of a Trivial Pursuit, but you have to answer psychological questions about the different developmental stages of a human. And we had a really fun time trying to figure out what the answers to the questions were going to be. This is psychology 40 years ago, and we were pleasantly surprised in a couple of situations where they were actually more evolved than we assumed them to be. But yeah, this seems like it would have been outside of that. I wouldn't mind playing that game again, so maybe I'll look for this next time we play it. Avoid giving sensual details. I'm sorry. If you have sensual details, you should probably be confessing to a cop, not to the person you offend. It is a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret. This is victim blaming 101. Like, how dare all of these survivors on Shiny Happy People talk about the ways that they were harmed because it was done in secret, and it's a shame to speak about those things. I hear this all the time about family trauma, and you should never talk to anybody about that because that would be so humiliating for your family. And it's like, oh, sorry, I'm so worried about them being humiliated, and I'm just not even going to worry about the long lasting trauma that I have had to spend tens of thousands of dollars to try and fix over the last decade or so. My bad.
No, that's a big theme with like not my whole family, because everyone aside from my grandparents has actually handled it well in my case. I don't know, like my dad, when I told him what happened, got pretty angry, handled it how you think like a normal person would. But my grandmother, for example, even when I told her something that she clearly knew happened, just like shut it down. She just we don't talk about that. I don't want to deal with the drama. Okay, all right.
I'm
That's
sorry,
fine.
this is just drama for you. It's trauma for me.
Exactly.
The sensual details are neither important nor appropriate to review. This only tends to stir up the mind of the hearer to the past. Well, maybe we should be thinking about the past. You can't just expect everybody to be like, oh, I'm sorry I did that to you. No worries, bud. Thanks for asking for forgiveness. And then we completely sweep it under the rug. Like, especially if this is a repeated issue. No,
Exactly.
if you look
Like,
at the ecclesiastical directions for how to handle conflict within the church, it says that if you have a dispute with another church member, you take it to them privately first. If they do not hear you, you go back to them with a witness or two. If they do not hear your group request for whatever, then you take it to the whole church. Like, yes, you didn't take it to the whole church as the first thing. You gave them a chance to fix it without everybody being involved. But if they weren't, you know, making appropriate changes to prevent from doing that thing again, taking it to the greater community was a big deal. Like, that's what you
yeah.
did to keep people in check, so you didn't have all of this secret bullshit going on that turns into an FBI investigation.
No, exactly. There was some crap that went on like that with my in-laws church, and I really don't know the extent of it, and I wish I did. And like I'm kind of mad at myself for like not asking to attend their church just so I could like get involved with their bullshit. But apparently there was some like CSA that went on, but like they were very of the attitude of we're just not going to talk about this. I for like months went like absolutely feral trying to figure out if it like went to the police or not,
Right?
because like I don't know with these people, and I'm pretty sure it did, but it was just weird how they talked about it.
Yeah.
Because there have been instances where they've tried to like get me to open up about my trauma, but I'm like, you literally don't want to discuss it though. If what happened, you would just want the conversation to stop immediately. So what's the point?
Yeah. Exactly. When people do not make themselves clearly apparent as a safe space, do not expect me to open up about my trauma to you. That is what is improper and not appropriate. Like, have some respect for
Exactly.
consent. I know that's a foreign concept with these folks, but wow, you thought this was bad? Wait till we talk about personal rights and how you don't actually have any.
I'm sure there will be some lovely design choices as
Oh,
well.
absolutely. There's some fantastic infographics we're going to watch. Yeah. So that is the first section of the basic seminar that I put together. I split it into kind of 3 basic sections within the basic seminar. That's basic too many times, but whatever. We will go over the next section next week and then hopefully be able to tackle the 3rd section the week after that, so you'll know what we're going to be doing for a while. But I do want to hear from all of the viewers and the folks picking us up on the podcast. Let me know what kind of specific questions that you have about the basic seminar, and I will try to put together a Q&A kind of thing once we have finished going through the actual book. So please send those. I have an email on my YouTube profile. You can also reach out to me on Instagram, or just comment on the video below. But I do want to hear what questions you guys have so we can go into those specific things in a little bit greater detail. As always, I want to thank you for coming along on this journey with us. Of course, make sure to like the video. If you really like us, make sure to subscribe, and we hope to see you back here next week.
Yes.